Hello and welcome to another edition of Three Blokes in a Pub. And today we're in Dublin. You can see lovely Dublin behind us. And we're in an old smuggler's
That's
pub.
right.
We're with Robert Stephenson again. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the history of this pub?
Well, it goes back, well over 100 years, and this pub became a smuggling point because you can see the coast from here all the way across Dublin Bay. So when there was ships coming in and when the peelers were around, there was a blue light swung if it was okay for the smugglers to come up and do their thing. And so this is how it came. And so this is the original pub. It's been here, I think, since 1830, and it goes that far back. Yeah.
Wow, amazing. Well, interesting place. So today we're going to discuss. Yesterday we talked about the impact of Brexit on Northern Ireland and the border specifically. Today we want to talk a little bit more about Brexit and its impact on the island of Ireland as a whole, and also the Republic of Ireland.
Right.
So we're going to kick off by saying, just explaining that the economy of Ireland in particular is very, very linked in with the economy of the United Kingdom. So much so that we trade more with the Republic of Ireland than we do with Brazil, Russia, India and China put together. Yeah. That is a huge amount of trade.
Yeah.
And this has grown in the last 40 years.
Well, it's always been there because obviously Ireland was a colony of England, and then after our independence back in 1922.
Like you do bunny ears here.
Yeah, well, the independence in 22.
Independence.
Effectively.
Yeah.
There was a huge, obviously, relationship. That still goes on to the present day. Now, before Ireland joined the EU, 70% of our trade was with, Great Britain as such. Yeah. Now it's 40%, right? But of course, the volume has increased hugely.
That's a trick that the politicians like to play. They say, but we trade less with the EU now as a percentage. But in absolute volume, we trade more with the EU than ever before.
Absolutely, and the same with Ireland, because 70% in 1973 was that.
Yeah, exactly.
40% in 2018 is that.
Well, this is what we keep saying. When a politician talks about growth rates, which is just a nonsense, because the growth rate of Bhutan at the moment, for instance, is 11.1%.
Wow, that's
amazing. Double-digit growth. Right. But you're starting from a very, very low base.
So if you're at £100, and you get 11% growth rate, you've got 11 extra pounds to spend.
It just, as a general rule, if a politician comes out with some statistics, it's probably a lie. It's probably a way.
Well, they're going to twist it whichever way suits them, right? Yes. But the realities of life on the ground here and in Northern Ireland and the UK are not statistics per se. Yeah. They're actual life and death and real life issues like jobs, work, communication, socialisation, etc., etc., etc. So, for Ireland in general, the potential of Brexit is completely destructive on every level, on an economic level, on a social level, on a cooperation level, and on a political level, which in Ireland is even much more important than in mainland England, if you like, because we've got a problem.
We've got a history.
We've got a history, right, which is just underneath the surface, as we discussed yesterday.
Yeah. So I just want to follow up on the point about the exports, because there's the Brexit teams and the Leave campaigns. They talk about our exports to the EU have been decreasing, and they're decreasing, and they're decreasing. And that's just not true.
No, the exports are going up, aren't they?
Yeah.
It's the percentage because we're trading more with the rest of the world at the same time.
If you look at our exports to the EU, other EU 27 countries, they've actually increased every year for the last 25, 30 years. Wow. So by an average of about 3%. But as the EU have expanded their global trade relationships, new free trade agreements, new cooperation agreements with new markets, the UK have been able to take advantage of that, and our exports to other non-EU countries have actually increased by 6% per year. Yeah. So we're increasing our trade with the EU. As members of the EU, we're also increasing our trade to the rest of the world, which is another 60 countries. And all of our trade, pretty much, over 90%, is covered within EU cooperation, EU trade agreements.
Because we lose all of that. We keep saying this, but it's not just the EU. Because of the EU, we can get cheap goods from America. We can get cheap goods from Canada, from Japan, without having to pay the full maximum World Trade Organization tariffs, and this is what we're going to be going back to. I want to go back to what I was just discussing with Robert there about the threat to the Republic of Ireland, but also the island of Ireland in general.
Yeah.
But is there not an opportunity here, first of all, for Northern Ireland to put its foot down, tell Arlene Foster and a gang of crazies to bugger off, because they supported the Leave campaign, which actually lost in Northern Ireland. So they were the losers, but for some reason now the losers of the campaign are in charge,
if you like.
Yeah, which is a strange quirk of democracy. But basically, she's saying that she just wants a hard Brexit. She'd be quite happy to see a hard border. And yesterday, she effectively said that she'd be quite happy to see the Good Friday Agreement, which the DUP didn't vote for.
Did they oppose it?
They opposed it.
Yeah, they opposed it.
They would be quite happy to see it torn up, effectively, which is the most important international treaty that Britain has signed in the last 50 years.
Since the Second World War.
Since the Second World War.
Yeah.
It is, because it ended 30 years of troubles.
Yeah. Well, we passed by a couple of towns yesterday, Warren Point being one, where 18 British soldiers were killed on one particular day, the same day that Mountbatten got blown up. And 2 English tourists got shot at, one of whom was killed by the British Army. And this is how important it is. It's not just Irish people that are going to get killed.
It's life and death.
It's people.
But Robert, what I was saying is, isn't this an opportunity for Northern Ireland to put its foot down and say, no, we want to be different from the rest of the UK. We want to stay in the single market. We want to stay in the customs union. We'll nominally not be part of the EU as such, but we can be the stepping stone between the EU, with the open border, and the UK.
Well, if that happened, it would probably be the best thing that ever happened for Ireland, because, Northern Ireland is lagging way behind the Republic of Ireland in terms of, commerce and jobs and
business, economy,
et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. Mostly people employed in Northern Ireland, I think 55% are employed by the state, right? Wow, okay. So that's an interesting statistic, and that's why the UK government is having to put 11 to 12 billion pounds a year into Northern Ireland. So the reality is if
that's more than we pay for the membership of the EU, isn't it?
You're not wrong. You're not
actually,
wrong.
Right, okay.
that could be the case. I mean, I don't know the figures.
We pay more to keep 1.8 million people as part of the UK, half of which don't want to be part of the UK,
more than half,
than we pay for unlimited access to the goods and services, trade deals, everything, with 27 of the richest, the most democratic, and some of the most beautiful countries in the world.
Yeah, but they're British.
What are British?
Northern Irish.
Yeah. Ooh.
Like it or not.
Well, I wouldn't say that if I were you, because therein lies the problem.
I have a geographical problem with this. If anything, they're a British overseas territory.
Yeah.
Because the island of Great Britain, as opposed to Brittany, which is Little Britain,
maybe I came across right. What I meant was the Brexiteers were going
England, Scotland, and Ireland.
They talk about
England, Scotland, and Wales.
They talk about these unelected bureaucrats in Brussels and in the Commission who are making all our laws. And there's 33,000 staffers in the European Commission looking after administration and bureaucracy for 28 countries and 550 million people.
Yeah.
And when you explain to a Brexiteer that there's only 33,000 people doing that, who are the officials in the Commission, and we tell them that there's 405,000 unelected bureaucrats in the British civil service in the UK, they go, yeah, but they're British civil servants.
Oh, that's all right. British unelected.
Yeah. And that was the point I was just trying to make then. It's like Northern Ireland, so it's only 1.1 million, but they're British people, they're not French or German.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
So,
okay,
I do take the point, absolutely.
So a deal Brexit, in which we say, okay, well, we're going to have Northern Ireland special status, special zone,
which will require some form of border,
on the map
which will have to be through the Irish Sea.
Yeah. On the map
Well,
it'll
like
have
the one
that
that's already
wonderful
there.
cross-hatching to show that this is a special zone where you can have UK goods and EU goods that have come across from the mainland
that could
of
revolutionise
Europe
the economy of Northern Ireland.
Right. So if we have
a positive,
but if we have a no trade deal, obviously that's going to be devastating for the economy of Northern Ireland. But would that not represent an opportunity for the economy of the Republic of Ireland to steal all of our business? Because they can be the entry point for Japanese car manufacturers, for American tech companies, for everything into Europe.
Well, yes and no.
Finance.
Right, yes and no, okay?
Right.
There are opportunities for Ireland, and already there's a number of financial other institutions, and including people, Jacob Rees-Mogg, moving some of their stuff over to Dublin.
Oh, wow. So there's people in Dublin, there's people in the city here who are just going, oh, Brexit.
Oh, yeah.
And they're doing this literally at their hands right now.
There's
nice one, Brexiteers.
There's a certain amount of potential, right? But if you put that balanced against all of the negatives that's going to happen, there's
what are the main negatives? What are the main sort of takeaways from this?
Well, just about the relationships between people in Ireland and Great Britain, if you like, is actually for the last 20 years they've been fantastic. We get on every front. Irish politicians and UK politicians, well, with the exclusion of a few of the DUP and a few others, actually are always in touch with each other. They're working together in Europe for common goals.
So our elected representatives in the European Parliament, which is an elected representative parliament.
Democratically elected.
Democratically elected.
Who knew?
By English people and Irish people.
They often team up with the
all the time.
Irish MEPs if they want to get this on votes. There's a lot of similarities between the two countries.
Our interests are intertwined for obvious reasons. I mean, we're the closest neighbours and allies. And for most, not all, but most of what goes on in Europe, the Irish MEPs, elected MEPs, and the British, if you like, they cooperate and they work together and vote together. There's 73, I think, MEPs, British MEPs, and there's 11 Irish, soon to become 13, because we're going to inherit a few from the, if there is a breakup.
That's a really interesting point, actually, because people talk about, the EU bully the UK all the time. They bully our MEPs. And we don't get a choice.
Bully us.
No, if you look at the history.
If you add up the fact that we've got our own 73 MEPs in the UK, then you've got the Irish MEPs as well. And because we vote as a bloc, we're actually significantly more powerful than someone like France, who's the second most influential member of the EU.
Well, absolutely. We outvote them in a sense. And if you look, here's a very interesting thing, actually. It's worth looking up for any of the Googlers who want out there. Is if you look at all the requests and demands, if you like, from the UK since 1973, including, the certain exclusions that they've had and so on, the EU has agreed to practically every single one. Right? There's a whole big list, right? Which mean the UK and Ireland are excluded from Schengen, for example, and many, many, many other things. There's a whole list. I've seen it online. There's a huge list of things. So it's not as though the UK has been sort of stopped in its desires by the EU. On the contrary,
because
the
we're
EU
one of the
has
most
been
powerful organisations in the EU.
But the EU has bent over backwards to give rebates to, with Thatcher when she got her handbag out and banged the table, whatever, all that type of stuff. That was all in the UK's favour.
She got a handbag out and banged the table.
It's a bit like, Khrushchev with the heel of his boot in the UN back in the day. Anyway,
sorry, I just had to adjust something behind the camera.
The result of all that was that actually the UK has a very favoured status in the EU and has never really been excluded or stopped from doing anything it wanted to do. And this whole illusion that the UK is like our own laws.
There was this interchange between Kenneth Clarke and David Davis, where Kenneth Clarke said to him, "Name me one British law that we failed to enact because of the EU."
And he couldn't.
And he couldn't. And he said, but it's the principle.
Exactly.
The principle. What? What principle? The principle that we want to be stupid and throw away this awesome stuff that we've already got set up.
Well, the benefits to the UK, I mean, it's so sad to look at. I mean, I'm an outsider in a sense looking at the UK now from Dublin at the moment, but having spent half my life in the UK and gone to school there and worked there and everything else, I'm a London Irishman, if you like, right? So I look at it dispassionately. I look at all the benefits that the EU has brought to the UK in terms of just the increase in trade and everything else that has been because of the single market, because of the relationship. I look at the amount of grants that have come to the parts of the UK that have been traditionally starved of funds, and as we know,
Liverpool,
exactly, and Sunderland,
Newcastle,
and Cornwall,
the Conservatives,
and all of the all the bits north of a certain line. They have been starved of infrastructure from Westminster, as you know, and look at the railways in the north of England, for example, that you have to deal with. So the reality is that the UK has been benefiting to a huge extent, and you keep on hearing this talk from these, mad, call them mad politicians in the UK who are screaming about Europe, sending money to Europe and all that. The fact is that most of that money comes back. In fact, on top of that, all the benefits of the single market and the customs union, etc., mean that UK trade has exploded.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're building better infrastructure through things like the EU CEF, the Connecting Europe facility, there are billions of pounds that have been pumped into the United Kingdom.
Completely.
If you look at the European Investment Bank, they've invested £29 billion into the UK, into infrastructure over the last few years. And across the country, as you say, from Cornwall to Scotland to North Wales to Cardiff and South and Swansea, across the entire United Kingdom.
Yeah.
And as you build better infrastructure, it makes it easier to make goods and have a business in the UK.
Yeah.
Hence the £1 trillion plus of foreign direct investment into the UK, so they can build something in Birmingham and ship it to London down the M40, and then down around the M25 to Dover, and ship it out into the largest single market on the planet. Yeah. But all of these numbers are not counted by...
The Tories are currently having their conference. Theresa May's just done a really... a speech in which I think she's been cribbing notes from Hugo Chavez, the now deceased
Venezuelan
dictator of Venezuela. People say he was democratically elected. Right?
No, she stole them from Jeremy Corbyn, who stole them from Chavez.
Just talking absolute nonsense, just rhetoric. Just
I thought you were going to swear then.
I know. I felt like swearing.
Yeah.
She actually referred to the Scottish fishing industry.
Again.
No,
there's nothing wrong with this.
80% of our economy is the services economy that we sell around the world. Services, not fish.
But there's nothing wrong with the Scottish fishing industry.
I know it's on its arse because all the foreigners are coming and taking our fish.
No, but do you remember when we went to Spain
If only
recently?
that was true.
And we were talking to British expats or British immigrants in the south of Spain.
Yeah.
We're sitting down there, had a dinner, and you've got these beautiful big old prawns that were caught by Scottish fishermen and sold to the EU, shipped down to Spain, and then we're eating them down there. So if you take
a really nice paella, didn't we?
We did, yeah. If you take away the market for the fishermen, why are they complaining about being in the EU?
Well, this is interesting. This is why Hull wanted special exemption. But the point I was going to make about the Tory conference is taking place in the ICC, is it? The National Conference.
ICC.
It's going to be very icy. It's very, very icy.
No, I was talking about the cricket. No, the conference centre that's taking part in has a plaque on the front saying this would not have been possible had it not been for the regional development grant from the European Union that allowed it to happen.
To build a conference centre.
To build a conference centre.
Yeah.
And they're having a conference in this centre, and you've got Theresa May standing up and saying, Europe's being mean to us. And I'm cringing.
Do you know, UKIP did the same thing in Torquay when they had their annual conference. They had it in the conference centre that was rebuilt by the European Union funds. The irony.
This thing of, could you imagine the ghosts of these prime ministers past, like Palmerston, Gladstone, Disraeli, Churchill, looking down at
Cameron,
what's going on. No, he's not dead yet. Looking down.
Sure? Where is he?
Even
how do you
Thatcher, looking down at these mealy-mouthed little politicians going, Europe's being mean to us. We're being bullied by Europe. And I'm thinking, how far has Britain fallen?
Well, not far enough, I'm afraid, because the reality is there's bad stuff happening right now. There's been a decrease in the UK economy, and you can't now employ people there's 100,000 job vacancies in the NHS, or I don't know how much, but I heard that figure.
108,000.
Oh, 108,000.
108,000 job vacancies in the NHS.
So if you think it's starting to look bad now, you just wait until what happens from April onwards, right? Yeah. For a start off, there's going to be a mass exodus of people who no longer have the right to work in the UK. The 3.5 million Europeans that are actually currently doing good jobs and paying taxes and have been shown very clearly to be putting, I think it's an average of £70,000 plus each into the economy.
No, a net benefit.
Net benefit rather than, because this whole thing, all these foreigners coming over and taking our jobs and using our services.
That's rubbish.
On the contrary, they're actually maintaining those services.
But listen to us for just 1 second for this one point. If we get someone who's been educated in another country, it means we didn't have to pay for them to be born. Yeah. We didn't have to pay for them to be vaccinated. We didn't have to pay for their education, which is really expensive. We didn't have to pay to keep them alive for the first 18 years of their lives. We didn't have to pay any tax credits towards their family. We didn't have to pay anything towards their childcare facilities. So that you get childcare credits in the UK and things like that. We didn't have to pay for any of that. They just turn up as a fully packaged adult human being with skills. And we get to basically
benefit
from
without having to pay for the creation.
And the thing about EU citizens, which is slightly different from people coming from Pakistan and people coming from the Philippines, they're coming from first world countries. There's a good chance that they will work in the UK in their 20s and maybe into their 30s, but at some point they'll settle down and say, hey, I want to start a family. What a lot of people do is go back. They go back to Poland, they go back to Romania, they go back to France, because they want their kids to grow up where they grew up.
Where their grandparents
and that
are,
is
where
a
their
natural, friends and family are, where the grandparents are to help look after the kids.
Yep.
People from the Philippines, people from Pakistan, and people from Bangladesh and Jamaica are not going to do that. They're going to stay in the UK because they're coming from developing nations. Yeah. Quite obviously, they come from somewhere where you go into a supermarket and there's very little on the shelves, very little choice. And they come over to a country where they can do all right and there's so much choice, so much opportunity. Why would they go back? They're going to start their family in the UK.
Brexit is why they'll go back. Brexit's why they'll go back.
A lot of Europeans, including Irish, of course, I mean, let's face it, the Irish helped build, what is the roads that you're and everything else, and now, of course, with the education gone up, the Irish are running the banks.
So are the potholes in Liverpool's roads, are they all your fault?
No, I'd say no. But no, getting back to the main point is that people, there's a sort of a xenophobia thing going on, and I'm 65, so as a teenager and right up until the 90s really, but certainly in the 60s, 70s, 80s, I experienced from a child discrimination because I was Irish, because it was back to the no blacks, no Irish type of days, and my parents emigrated when I was 2.5 and so on. So I've personally experienced a lot of racism against Irish people, and my big fear right now, and one of the terrible things that's going to happen out of this whole Brexit nonsense, is that there's people already looking for scapegoats in the United Kingdom, particularly the politicians and the media, and they're starting to blame Europe for the UK exit, I'll call it, because it's the UK who decided to exit. It's not the Europeans pushing. On the contrary, the Europeans are still saying, please don't go, you can stay in the club, enjoy the benefits, be happy. Right? No,
they're not throwing us out.
We're not, on the contrary, we're almost begging you to stay, because it's not good for anybody, particularly not the UK, right? Yeah. We know that the European Union will, suffer, but a fraction of what the UK is going to suffer now.
That's like the Irish situation.
But here's the thing: we are going to suffer the most of any European country, not only in terms of the economy, in terms of our personal relationships with people. Yeah. Right? Because if this blame game gets worse, which is going to be, I remember the days.
Theresa May's speech was all blame,
where the Daily Mail and the Express and the Sun were sort of saying, "Don't buy Irish butter." Don't buy Irish butter. I mean, I remember that. That's in the 80s. That's not so long ago. Don't buy, and because they blamed the Irish for the troubles. That they called it the Great Troubles. So it's all the Irish fault, right? Nothing to do with British policy, nothing to do with 800 years of colonialism or anything like that. No, nothing. No, it's all. So it's the Irish fault for everything. And this is going to come back in because it's already started at that conference, the Conservative Party conference. If you just pick up the media at the moment, you can see it's, the nasty Europeans are trying to blackmail us and screw us, etc., etc., which is just not true.
That's what Theresa said. Theresa May has got this idea that what happens in a divorce is that one party says, I want to leave, and the other person says, well, I don't want you to go. He said, well, I'm leaving anyway, but I'm going to stay in the house for 2 years. I'm not going to actually move out of the house, but I want to see other people. Okay. Right, well, we've got to come to some sort of arrangement so that in 2 years' time, you move out. Okay, I'll agree to that. I'll move out after 2 years. And then what Theresa May is basically saying is, okay, I've after faffing around for 2 years and not actually coming up with any decent divorce ideas of how it's going to work, comes back and says, look, okay, so we're going to be divorced. I don't have any financial obligation to you, but I still want to have sex with you.
Whenever I want, as well, by the way,
while having sex with other people. How do you feel about that? And your partner says, no, absolutely, 100% not. That's the checkers deal. And they're like, I'm not even going to countenance this. There's no chance. And they go, okay, well, I'll go away and I'll come back 3 months later with the same deal. And they're still like, no, we said no 3 months ago. What do you think has changed in the last 3 months? I'm not having a marriage that's not a marriage in which we still have sex and you can't get to have sex with other people. Are you crazy? That goes against everything that marriage stands for, or the idea of having international cooperation agreements stands for. And yet she is now acting like the partner who didn't want to split up is in the wrong but you should have come up with a counter proposal. To which you say, well, I don't want you to leave.
Well, that counter proposal thing is nonsense because they've already come up and they have been furnished, the UK government has been furnished with counter proposals, right? You know, of course, privately, because...
Has Theresa May seen any of them?
Yeah, let's dig into this a little bit, because there is a draft withdrawal agreement with all the terms and conditions and the pages and everything that goes in, the basic EU citizens' rights, protecting those, the financial settlement, a proposal for the...
also British people's rights in the EU.
Vice versa, and so all the legal separation pieces are proposed. They're all written down in a draft. And then you've got the political declaration, which is still being backwards and forwards a little bit. But pretty much that template is there, ready for the UK to sign. And so she says we need another proposal. It's like, no, well, here's a proposal that fits within the rules, because the EU is a rules-based organisation. And up to a point, the EU's hands are tied as well, because they have other international obligations.
Well, they're completely tied. You know, if
they have a bit of flexibility.
If Europe agreed to what the UK government has been proposing, it would mean effectively the breakup of the European Union.
Well, not so much just that. It's even worse than that for the EU. If they were to accept
they would be
UK
breach of their other,
they'd be in breach of their other international agreements with another 60 countries around the world.
That's right.
They'd be in breach of the World Trade Organization rules. And there's no way
and then
they can
all
do
of those
that.
countries not only might sue the EU, and they're probably going to sue the UK as well, they'd be coming back looking for different terms all at the same time. Because if, you can't just change the rules for one country and then expect that all the other countries are going to be happy.
There's a bloke over there, looks just like Graham. Sorry.
Right, okay, well, there you go. He's amazing. He can appear and disappear.
Sorry, I've got to...
this is a really interesting point, and we're going to do another episode on this in a bit more detail. But effectively, Brexit allows foreign companies that have invested in the UK and created these jobs and created industry and boosted our economy and contributed to the HM Treasury that has paid for the NHS and Department of Work and Pensions and Fire Brigade and Police and the Army and all of the other public sector organisations. These companies have been in the UK. When they arrived, there's a beeping going on over there.
That's your camera.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Sorry, the battery's running out. These companies now signed a contract on the basis that we have access to the single market, the largest single market on the planet, and all these other 60 countries' markets around the world through cooperation and FTAs that the EU has signed. The UK government, through Brexit, has moved the goalposts of that original BIT, it's called, a bilateral international treaty. So that company has the potential to be able to sue the UK government for their loss of earnings.
With who?
They could do it through 4 different ways, depending on the nature of the original contract and what particular clauses were in it. So Nissan, for example, could sue the government in UK courts for breach of contract. UK courts. They could go to the World Bank and sue them under an international dispute mediation type solution.
The World Bank?
With the World Bank.
Okay.
They could go to the World Trade Organization and file a dispute against the United Kingdom. And things like if the UK decides that they're not going to pay the £39 billion worth of financial obligations, which have been agreed under the withdrawal agreement, the EU could take us to the International Court in The Hague. Now, when you look at any one of those 4 scenarios, out of the 120 Japanese companies that are in the UK at the moment, they could go down that road. While we're being sued by a foreign investor into the United Kingdom, what other country on the planet is going to want to talk to us about a free trade arrangement? Bearing in mind, we've just broken the contracts we've just signed. We've left the European Union. We've abandoned the treaty for the European Union. We're asking them to
reneged on the Good Friday Agreement.
Reneged on the Good Friday Agreement.
And
it's just ridiculous.
According to what the various Tory politicians and others are saying right now, refused to pay the money that the British government had agreed prior to the referendum to contribute towards the European budget, this famous 39 million. Billion.
But that's
so they can't. I mean, if this is the type of thing that drives me insane, is I'm watching television, I'm watching questions and answers, I'm watching news, I'm watching these interviews with these British politicians. And they come out with these things like, oh yeah, well we won't have to pay this 39 if we don't, if there's a no deal. Yes, you will. And the fact is,
you'll be forced to by a court.
Well, besides having to be forced by an international court eventually to pay it, is the goodwill and the reputation.
Yes.
And it's about, business is about what? It's about confidence, it's about reputation.
Yeah, trust.
Yes, it's about trust and that is written in contracts, right? To make it, if it ain't in writing, it ain't worth it. So it has to
back to.
So the British reputation in terms of business around the world is going to be is being destroyed right now by the very same politicians that are saying, "Oh, we're going to do brilliantly around the world. The whole world is waiting for us, to trade with them." Why would you trade with a pirate who's not going to pay you what they agreed to pay you, who's going to change the rules in the middle because on a whim, right? And wind up destroying their own economy and their own people and their neighbours, like Ireland in this case.
So that's actually a really good point.
Right?
You used a really interesting word in there, and the word you used was confidence.
Yeah.
If you go back to the 2008-9 financial crisis, the bounce back here in Southern Ireland, Republic of Ireland, I get told off every week.
No, it's the Republic of Ireland officially, right?
Okay, the island. The
Republic of Ireland.
We are in the Republic of Ireland.
The island's called Ireland.
The island
this
of
bit
Ireland.
is called the Republic of Ireland.
Yeah, exactly.
Or Ire.
No, that's
Free State. There's all these different names.
No.
Pick one.
I'm telling you now, it's officially the Republic of Ireland, okay?
Right. The big bit, the bottom half of the country.
The Republic of Ireland.
Yes. Their bounce back was actually pretty good post the financial crisis. They came back pretty quickly compared to certainly the UK and many other countries. And the economic growth over here at the moment is pretty good still.
8.5%.
So the Republic of Ireland, you're going to take an economic hit because of Brexit, for sure.
Yeah.
But the fact that the rest of the world has watched you bounce back, they have confidence to see if you do take a hit, then you're likely to bounce back again reasonably well. Yeah.
Better. Yeah, well, that's a very interesting point. It's about confidence. Now, the Irish government could have, and many said should have, told the world banks and the European banks who speculated on the Irish economy and the building trade, etc. And when the crunch came and the property bubble exploded in the negative, the people who had taken the risk had been mostly European banks, but plenty of American banks too.
Sure.
So the Irish government had an option to do what the Icelandic government did and say, okay, well, look, you speculated privately. If you were going to make a profit, it was your profit. Now you're making a loss. You want the Irish taxpayer to pay for it. But the Irish taxpayer, I think probably stupidly, said, okay, well, we'll take up the loss of all these European banks, because here's an interesting point of fact, is that the European Commission and banks and everything came to Ireland and say, well, if you don't agree to pay us back, all of these banks are going to go bust because it'll destroy the confidence in the banking system
and the
worldwide
reputation.
and the reputation.
Yeah.
So the Irish took a very big hit to the extent of 130 billion,
Right.
which is being paid off. So we were the good little boys of Europe.
Yeah.
So I suppose the benefit now to us is that the Europeans have seen that the Irish could have said, you know what, you speculated and you lost, we're not going to take up the loss. The Irish government and people took up the loss, and we're still paying it. We'll be paying it off for the next 70 years, by the way.
Well, we are too in Britain. We've got
in
10
fact,
years of
the
austerity
UK
now.
were one of the first to come and help Ireland in that sense. That, okay, well, there's X billion from the UK.
Right.
Anyway, long story short is, we were the good little boys of Europe. I suppose we played the game. We stayed by the rules.
Yeah.
We were nice guys.
Yeah.
I suppose the
And you're reaping the
payback is
benefits.
we're reaping the benefits.
Yeah.
Right now, what the UK is doing now is destroying all the goodwill it's got, not only with Ireland, but with the whole of Europe and
With
in
the
fact,
whole
whole world.
The
This
whole
is
world.
it, the whole world.
The
Because
world is
they're saying,
laughing
we're going
at
to
us.
renege on our deals. We're not going to pay back the debts we promised. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. Why?
Yeah.
Because it suits the Tory party and the DU party.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually suit the British people.
Yeah,
right?
no,
But
absolutely,
unfortunately,
categorically doesn't.
if you watch, and I'm watching, all the British media, but I'm in Ireland, and I'm more informed, and I also read, the Irish Times, and I read the Figaro, and I see what's happening, and the reporting that I'm getting is more balanced.
The
shall we say,
reporting
right?
in the UK
I'm not,
is shocking.
Well, I'm not reading the Express every day and taking it in as gospel.
but it's
or
shocking.
the Sun, or and I had this Charlie on, this idiot Sun journalist on Sky TV last night, talking absolute rubbish, right, with an authority. And his thing is, and of course, I'm glad to say, he said that, this, that, and the other piece of rubbish, and I'm backed by 17.5 million people for saying a bunch of lies, basically. Right?
Wow.
That's what he did last night.
I'm backed by 17.4 million people to be horrible and racist to my neighbour.
Exactly, and ruin everybody
And that's what a
else's
lot of
lives.
people in the UK think.
So I think some of the
Because they don't care.
I want to
Or
roll
do
it
they
back.
care?
I want to roll it back. Let's not rerun the referendum. Everybody
Right.
knows that they lied, and it's a whole pile of rubbish. But where do we go from here? I mean, the Republic
point.
is going to take a bit of a hit economically, and
Oh, big hit.
so
Big hit.
a big
Big
hit,
hit.
a big hit.
But worse
it's-
than
The
that.
biggest of any other country apart from the UK.
Yeah.
But it is likely to recover. I mean, we were talking about 120 cruise ships have docked into the Belfast in so far this year.
Yeah.
I think it was yesterday or maybe this morning.
Yeah.
So these 120 cruise ships come in with all these tourists with wallets full of cash ready to spend in the north and the south. But there's not enough coaches in Northern Ireland to actually pick these tourists up off the boats and drive them around and allow them to spend the money. So at the moment, the coaches come up from the Republic of
Well, a
Ireland.
certain amount do.
A certain amount do. Yeah, so
Yeah.
they use the Northern
Yeah.
Irish ones and the ones from the Republic, and they share the wealth, if you like, because the tourists are going all over the place.
And
One
by
of
the way,
opportunities-
Ireland markets Ireland as a country.
Yeah.
So the Northern Irish Tourist Board and the Southern Irish Tourist Board
Work
if you like,
together.
work together.
Cooperation.
And they cooperate in America and all these important destinations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know because I did
Well,
also work in the
I
tourist
picked
industry.
up a leaflet about the Game of Thrones filming locations
Yeah.
in Northern Ireland
Yeah.
when I came across on the ferry into Dublin.
There you go.
Yeah.
Right. So this is how integrated the economies of Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland
You
are.
stick a border in there, though.
But it's like,
You know,
well, I tell you what it's like doing. Why don't you build a wall between London, Birmingham, Manchester, and just cut off the UK in half, right? Why don't you just do that, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, you can't drive no more from London to Leeds because you don't have a license to once you cross that border. This is what it's like.
Yeah.
This is the insanity of the situation.
And that's what the government are proposing.
Yeah, that's what they want.
So
That's
the-
what the Brexiteers want. That's what people who voted for Brexit voted for. They voted to diminish Britain's standing in the world, to destroy our economy, to destroy our neighbours' economies as best as we can. And you were saying earlier,
I actually
Jason,
don't think they
that I
did.
shouldn't.
Sorry, I don't think that you can. Sorry, I don't think you can say that because I don't actually believe that most English people who voted to leave realised that they were voting for that. Right?
Yes,
Right.
Robert.
I'm afraid.
I think that was kind of my point.
I know, but let's spell it out.
They knew
Yeah,
they were
Let's
voting.
spell it out.
No,
Let's
they
spell
did
it out.
not know
They
what
were
they were
fed
voting
a bunch
for.
of lies, and we won't go
Hey,
back and rerun the referendum.
I didn't know. I didn't know. If anyone in the world who was sort of well versed in international politics and in travel, I mean, I've been to every country in the world, is qualified to have an opinion on something like should we be a member of the European Union. I mean, you can imagine like millions of people voting on British foreign policy, voting on British economic policy. It's madness. This isn't a social issue like the legalization of gay marriage or even abortion, where you've got two sides, you've got arguments on either side. This was something where it's like, do you want an unmitigated disaster or do you want to keep things as they are? And 17.4 million people were convinced by lies told in the media, tabloids, by the politicians who were still in power,
But they're still telling
to
the
vote
lies.
against their own better interests.
But let's not go back about this, but come back to this bounce back. Because we were talking about, I mean,
Right.
the cruise ships, if they can't get the passengers off the boats to have a tour around
They
Ireland,
won't come here, will they?
they won't go to Belfast. Where will they go? Probably Cork or
Well,
maybe Dublin.
Well, Dublin. They're
Yep.
coming into Dublin on the way
Yeah.
to Belfast, by the way, Bill.
That's it.
Yeah.
So,
They just won't go to Belfast.
They won't go
'cause-
to
yeah.
Belfast, that's it.
and there you go, all the rest of Northern Ireland. I mean, we were talking to...
Or Scotland.
Or Scotland. But the fact is that will be the part of the bounce back for the Republic.
Yeah.
And it will come at the cost of the economy in the north. The other people we were talking about was that small business, a haulage company, it's got 5 employees. They've moved already from Northern Ireland to the south. And you think, it's only 5 jobs. But you think about the implications of 5 jobs. Those 5 people that used to work in that haulage company in Northern Ireland, they've got no job now. That's 5 households who've got no income because that company has moved, been forced to move because
We
of
talked
Brexit.
about this yesterday.
We did, yeah. In a
company
small town,
Yeah.
that makes a difference, particularly
And
when
then you
the
roll it
same
out.
haulage company was paying for the sports, the GAA,
That's
the
it, the
hurling,
hurling,
the football,
yeah.
all that
That's
stuff.
it.
And
But
so
It's a
that's
huge impact on a small community, but that's
But this is the bounce back that the Republic will get.
repeated everywhere
So
else.
Well,
while
you
they'll
keep
take
on
a
talking
hit,
about this bounce back is, you see, again, we need to qualify that because there is an opportunity in business for Irish people the Republic of Ireland, if you like, or indeed the island of Ireland, to make some capital out of a disastrous Brexit, because we're potentially the only English-speaking country in Europe that's in the EU for start off, which certainly helps, when you're doing trade with the world, because it's through English.
Because the Scottish don't speak English, do they?
Well, they do. And I love the Scottish accent.
The Scottish are
speak
leaving
great
against
Gaelic
their
as well.
will.
But anyway, it's the social impact as well, right? Because we were talking earlier on, we were talking with an Irish politician just a few minutes ago who's been an MEP and a government minister here, etc. And we were talking about this issue of the social impact, because right now the economy of Ireland generally is doing pretty damn well. Even in Northern Ireland, it's picking up. The tourist industry is booming because of the peace. It's the peace dividend. There's been a huge peace dividend in Ireland. On top of that, the EU contributes a lot of money to help build the infrastructure that's needed for a successful economy, be it tourism or roads.
They think are war zones.
Well, exactly.
Because there's 457 other places that are not war zones that they can choose to go to instead.
Exactly. So that's it. So, but here's the social implication. With the way it's going at the moment, it looks like a no-deal Brexit, or a very bad Brexit, or a very bad trade deal, compared to what the UK has already right now, which you can go back to tomorrow, by the way. They can withdraw the letter of saying, and we welcome back in with open arms and on the same terms that they have right now, right? So that's possible tomorrow. The British government could do that tomorrow.
They could do that.
And stop all this nonsense.
You could do that, Theresa.
Yeah, actually stop
and you'll
the
only piss off half the country instead of going for a hard Brexit, which is going to piss off
everybody.
the entire country.
For 50 years.
For 50 years.
Right, maybe said. The social impact here of the economy taking a big hit, which it would, probably a 20% hit, right, almost overnight, right, will be a lot of unemployment. Now, if you have unemployment in the Republic of Ireland and in the North, which is going to be hit even more, right, where does that lead to? Unemployment leads to a lot of young people out of jobs, no jobs, no prospects, and who can't now leave Northern Ireland and go and get a job in France or Germany because they don't have the work permits anymore.
Well, we just heard that from Theresa May at the Tory party conference. All movement around the EU for British citizens, that right to live, trade, fall in love, get married, start a business, build a house, and retire in 27 of the richest, most prosperous, most democratic, and some of the most beautiful nations in the world has been taken from us.
Well,
imagine if you were just told, right, from now on, you can't leave your city. You've got to stay in the city in which you came out your mum. And if you leave that city, it's going to cost you. You're going to have to pay £5,000, or at least have £5,000 in your bank account to prove that you have a good enough job and can sustain yourself to go to Manchester, or to go to Leeds, or to go to Birmingham, or anywhere, even to,
well, it's the equivalent of that, isn't it?
Yeah,
right. Well, it's the equivalent.
Because I was born with these rights.
Oh, and there's
my birthright has been taken away from me by by liars, cretins, cheats, people who are felons. I mean, people who have broken the law and have got away with it, scot-free, and they brag. They brag at Aaron Banks. He brags about how he got away with it.
We could slag off the dictators that are currently running the country on social media separately. Let's
get back to that point in Ireland, right? Just to finish that point, right?
And relax.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, it's so annoying. It's just like so mind-bogglingly stupid, right? I wonder what the real reason is. Is it to do?
That's a whole other story.
That's a whole other story, right? Okay,
let's
we
stay
won't get into
social
that.
issues.
On the social issue is, if you get unemployment, you get disaffection. If you get disaffection, it feeds into the extremists, right?
Yeah.
In Irish context, it's going to literally bring violence back onto the streets, because if you put a border, there's going to be violence.
You don't have to have physical infrastructure.
And even the British government at the moment, in all its stupidity, knows that. Right? Now, mind you, it's going to cost a fortune for the British government to bring the troops back into Northern Ireland and all this.
But you have to ask why would they do that? Ask them why they would do that. You have to go back and see, even if you don't have sort of proper checkpoints and army vehicles and stuff at the checkpoint, you will need to have a customs officer there to measure the volume and the value of the goods.
Yesterday is once you put any official and any barrier or any even camera there, that camera is going to be literally taken down overnight.
I think this point that Jason
you're
made
going to have to
yesterday
defend the
has to
border.
be-
You have to
has to be
defend
made
the
again.
border.
Reiterate
Right,
it.
so look, listen, forget about the EU for a moment. Because we have unilaterally decided to leave the EU, we are moving under World Trade Organization rules, whether we like it or not. Even if we do get a deal with the EU, which we're not going to do, but even if we do, now the World Trade Organization says that if we're going to start negotiating with other countries, you know, the rest of the world that Rees-Mogg keeps going on about, that's so amazing, even though put together it's got not very much money.
We've done that, yep.
Yeah, they're basically saying, well, the WTO says you have to be able to quantify everything coming in and out of your country.
Yeah,
so the WTO say
It's
you've got to put
not
the
that,
rules.
no. It's not
We
the
don't
WTO.
have to.
It's not the WTO.
No.
It's the 164 individual
Members
member countries of
the World
that have
Trade
sat down
Organization.
and they've agreed the
Yeah.
rules amongst themselves.
So if we decide, oh no, we're not going to put up any customs checks or anything like that on the Irish border, we can do that. We can say, hey, we're not going to check anything coming in and out, whoop-de-doo. The EU will have to put customs checks on the border
That's
against
what
their will.
they're
So
obligated
at
to.
least one side going in and out
Yeah.
will check what's coming in and out. It won't
they
be,
have to.
It won't be twice on the border because normally, you know, customs you get it once when you go leave the country and once when you go into the country. There's usually the border points about 100 meters away from each other. That's the way borders normally work in most of the countries in the world. We're not used to this because we've grown up in a Europe that's been open. I mean, the last 20 years, 30 years, we've been able to travel around Europe and trade across Europe. The point is, you know those trade deals that Jacob Rees-Mogg thinks we're going to get with the rest of the world? We can't do them unless we put people on the border here.
That's right. Well, and that
We're not allowed to.
To finish the
Well,
point.
we're allowed
to
to.
finish
Well,
the point is
We're
once
allowed to. There's just nobody would.
Yeah,
Well,
no, but
Well, what happens when you do that, when you have to do that, is that becomes a point of violence. Now, on top of that, if you've got an economic situation in Ireland,
what
north
do you
and
mean by a
south,
point of violence?
it's an excuse. It's as they would say in the church, it's an occasion to sin. Right? Is if you, as soon as you put an official with a border and stop sign or a camera, one of the people who don't agree, which are many in Ireland, we don't agree to any border.
Yeah.
We're not. We've done it. We've had it. We're not doing it again. It's going to be taken down, right? That means you've got to defend that, right? So that means eventually the army are in. We're back to where we were in 1970s and 80s, right?
That
Let me finish the whole point.
sorry.
The unemployment thing is going to be literally feed the terrorist organisations. So if you've got 20% youth unemployment in Northern Ireland in 2 years' time, right? Which is where it's heading, right?
Yeah.
They're
I mean,
targets to be picked
well,
up by the
they're going to be
extremists.
scooped up, and they're going to be the kids
And
coming from,
radicalised.
you know, the poor working class Protestant or Catholic areas, and there's increasingly poor Protestants rather than Catholics because the Catholics got more educated, right? But if you know, they're the very people when you see. No, I'm serious.
Yeah,
This
no,
is
I
a
get- yeah,
fact.
I know,
It's- I'm not,
I
nothing,
understand.
you know. I'm Buddhist, so I'm not either.
We
right?
talked
So
about it.
put it that way,
We
right?
did
Okay.
talk about it, yeah.
You
know.
Buddhist, you
Well, not
monster.
much more,
I
because
saw
I'm
what
having a
you
pint
did
of
in
Guinness
Sri
here, but
Lanka
anyway.
and Burma.
Right,
you
but
horrible
getting
Buddhist.
away from that, right? But the
Buddhists.
point is, it's cannon fodder. You know,
Yeah.
this is all.
These kids.
These kids are going to be.
They will be abused.
They will be abused and taken in by the extremists in their areas, and we've seen it, you know, around the world. And
And
we've
if you,
seen it in
if you
Ireland.
think we're exaggerating this,
They will become the new terrorists, 20, 21-year-old, 23-year-old, new Ulster Volunteer terrorists or IRA terrorists, you know, real IRA, or whatever other extreme bloody murderous organisation comes out of this. But that's where it's heading. That's why
Organisations.
Organisations,
There'll be more
and
than
they
one.
are. But the other thing is, it only takes 5 or 10 or 20 people
to start it.
To start it.
Yeah.
It doesn't
And this is-
take...
we had a conversation earlier on today, and I really want to emphasise this point, because the real IRA, they're still here. They have not gone away.
No, they haven't.
You know, and the
Unfortunately.
guy that was saying this morning, he said there's an undercurrent and it's bubbling just under the surface within this part of the country. And there's people that will literally go around and say, if you don't smell of Semtex, if you've never had it in your hands, you're an outsider. And they go around looking for that. And the way that he phrased it, it's horrible.
Well,
I mean,
it's
these
much in
people
the
are
same
still
way as
there.
you've
These
got...
are the same people that were here before.
It's much in the same way as you've got gangs in Birmingham and London and everything else. Right now, as you know, there's a lot of violence in inner cities.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same sort of insane gang mentality. So, you know, it's another flag to wrap yourself around and create difference.
But it's real. I want people to understand how real this is.
Oh, no,
we're not
completely
exaggerating
real.
and fear-mongering and
No.
crying Project Fear,
This
trying
is
to scare you. This is the reality of people's lives here. Our driver yesterday, when we went to film the previous episode, he was driving down the road. He said, I would not drive down this road during the Troubles because one side or the other would probably shoot me. And you don't know who and you don't know why. But one of them will think you're the baddie and the other one will think you're the baddie. And there's places literally that people don't go. And when he said that to us, I could feel the memories of what was happening before.
Oh yeah. Well,
I was sitting in the back of the car. It's right there.
It's raw memory, and the Irish don't forget their history. It's just part of our.
I know.
As our,
I've noticed.
as we actually, your average Irish person knows their history going back hundreds of years.
Yes, they do.
Maybe not necessarily correct, but
Yeah.
that's a particular thing with Irish people. We don't forget what happened 20 years ago, and we don't forget the benefits that's happened now. But this is coming from Dublin, a rather gloomy Dublin at the moment, and that sort of really depicts
The outlook.
the depression that's setting in here, because we see our friends now. Most of my friends actually live in England, because I spent longer in England in my adult life than I have in Ireland.
Traitor.
Now, most of my friends.
Immigrant.
Yeah, exactly. My heart is bleeding for the UK.
Yeah.
I'm here today in my own time because I'm as passionate as you are about stopping Brexit.
For sure.
Because I can
to.
see clearly the consequences, not only first of all for the UK public, because they're going to suffer the most, but for the Irish and the Europeans, my friends in Europe. I mean, this is insanity, right? It's complete and absolute. It's national, economic, and social suicide.
It is.
That's what Brexit is. It's
That's
got to
the way
stop.
That's actually a really good piece to finish on.
Okay. All right. Well,
Okay.
thank you
I
so
think we
much
said it
for
all. Pleasure.
coming on
And come back,
the
because
show.
hopefully we'll stop Brexit and we'll get sunshine here.
We'll get sunshine. We'll come back and we'll do
come
a
back.
podcast about something nice.
So cheers.
Cheers. I've
Cheers
drank,
to
I've drank
the
all
best
McGuinness.
of Irish. Here.
All
See,
right,
this is
all right.
cooperation.
Look at
This
that.
is what you do.
Anglo-Irish
This is what
relations.
Ireland and
Cheers.
England do.
Cheers,
Right,
guys.
Best.
And as always,
Play good rugby.
Stop Brexit.
Yes.